If someone had told me the orange volunteer vest would fit worse than any tailored suit, I'd have laughed. At 59, I never imagined I'd be elbow-deep in fish guts and bird droppings. Yet there I was at the Gulf Coast Wildlife Sanctuary, scrubbing pelican cages like penance. The divorce papers were still warm in my lawyer's briefcase, and my penthouse had the hush of a mausoleum. 23 years of marriage, gone. Claudia Hale had found someone younger, someone who didn't vanish into 16-hour days at the magazine. I couldn't exactly blame her. The sanctuary director, Mrs. Mei Lin, pressed rubber gloves into my hands and nodded toward the rehab center. "We've got a brown pelican that came in yesterday. Fishing line around his wing. Poor thing. Think you can handle it?" I said I could, though the wildest thing I'd ever managed before was a temperamental photographer. The morning sun was already brutal. Typical Alabama summer heat that made my silk blouse stick to my back. I should have worn something more practical. The pelican sat hunched in a large enclosure, his dark eyes watching me with what looked like resignation. One wing hung awkwardly, tangled in clear monofilament that had cut deep into the flesh. Blood had dried along the cuts, and he flinched when I approached. "Easy there, big guy," I whispered, opening the cage door slowly. "Let's get you sorted out." That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Quiet, deliberate. I turned to see a woman about my daughter's age, maybe mid-30s, with sun-bleached blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her skin was deeply tanned, the kind you only get from years on the water, and her blue eyes held the same careful assessment I'd seen in the pelican's gaze. She wore faded jeans and a simple gray t-shirt that had seen better days. No makeup, no jewelry, except for a simple silver chain around her neck. Everything about her screamed working class, the complete opposite of my usual crowd of polished editors and society wives. "You're new," she said, her voice low and slightly husky. "Not a question." "First day," I admitted, suddenly self-conscious about my manicured nails and expensive watch. "I'm Evelyn Hart," she nodded once, like my name was information filed away for later use. "Marina Shore." Before I could say more, she was moving past me toward the pelican, her movements fluid and confident. She opened an equipment cabinet and pulled out wire cutters and antiseptic without hesitation. "Been doing this long?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. "Long enough?" She approached the bird with the kind of calm authority that made him settle immediately. "Hold his beak closed gently." I did as she instructed, surprised by how warm and smooth the pelican's bill felt under my palms. Marina worked with practice efficiency, cutting away the fishing line with careful precision. Her hands were strong, calloused from work, but incredibly gentle as she cleaned the wounds. "There," she murmured to the bird. Not to me. "That's better, isn't it?" The pelican seemed to understand, tucking his newly freed wing against his body with obvious relief. Marina applied antiseptic and wrapped the deeper cuts with gauze, her movements economical and sure. "How do you know so much about this?" I asked. She glanced up at me, those blue eyes unreadable. "Fishermen see a lot of birds get into trouble with gear. You fish commercially family boat?" She stood already gathering the supplies. "Been working these waters since I was 12. There was something in her tone that suggested the conversation was over, but I wasn't ready to let her disappear. "Will he be okay?" "Should be. Wing wasn't broken, just torn up. Few weeks of rest and proper feeding, he'll fly again." She was already moving toward the door, but I called after her. "Will you be back tomorrow?" Marina paused, her hand on the door frame. For a moment, I thought she might ignore the question entirely. Then she turned and something in her expression had softened just slightly. "Same time," she said. "Someone needs to check on him." After she left, I stood alone with the pelican, both of us refugees of sorts. The bird watched me with those ancient eyes, and I wondered if he could sense the restlessness that had driven me here, the desperate need to do something useful with my suddenly empty life. The morning heat was building, but I didn't mind. For the first time in months, I felt like I had somewhere to be tomorrow. I showed up at the sanctuary the next morning like a woman with a mission, which was ridiculous because I'd spent half the night wondering what the hell I was doing. The pelican was just an excuse, and we both knew it. Marina was already there when I arrived, crouched beside the enclosure with a bucket of fish that smelled like low tide and regret. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. She looked up, nodded once, and went back to her work. Same gray t-shirt, same worn jeans, same maddening silence that made me want to fill every quiet moment with chatter. "How's our patient doing?" I asked, peering into the cage. Better. Ate 3 mullet yesterday. 3 whole words. Progress. I watched her hands as she prepared the morning feeding. The way she moved with such certainty. Her fingers were long and capable with small scars that told stories I wanted to hear. When she reached into the bucket for another fish, our hands brushed as I tried to help. The contact was brief, maybe 2 seconds, but something electric passed between us. She pulled back quickly, but not before I saw her pupils dilate slightly. My skin tingled where we'd touched, and I had to resist the urge to rub the spot. Sorry, I mumbled, feeling heat rise in my cheeks like some teenager with her first crush. It's fine, she said. But her voice was softer now, less guarded. We worked in companionable silence for a while, cleaning the cage and checking the bird's wounds. The pelican was definitely improving, preening his feathers and showing more interest in his surroundings. Marina seemed pleased, though she expressed it only through the slight upturn of her lips. You know a lot about wildlife, I said, desperate to keep her talking. Golf's been my life since I was a kid. You learn things. What kind of things? She straightened, fixing me with those blue eyes that seemed to see right through my expensive facade, migration patterns, breeding seasons, which fish run when, how to read weather in the water. Sounds like poetry. It's survival. The bluntness of her response caught me off guard. Here I was, treating our conversation like some intellectual exercise while she was talking about making a living from the sea. The gulf between our worlds felt suddenly immense. I didn't mean to sound flippant, I said. I've just never met anyone who lived so close to nature. Most people haven't. She picked up the empty bucket, preparing to leave again. City folks see fishing as romantic. It's not. It's dangerous, unpredictable work. Is that why you're here? Taking a break from dangerous work? She paused, considering the question longer than I expected. Something like that. What do you do when you're not fishing? Read. Fix things. Listen to the water. The simplicity of her answer made my chest tight. When was the last time I just listened to anything without thinking about deadlines or market share or the next story angle? What do you read? I pressed. Everything. Novels, poetry, marine biology texts, whatever the library has. Poetry. I couldn't hide my surprise. Surprised a fisherman reads verse. There was a hint of amusement in her voice now. No, I edit a literary magazine. I spend my days surrounded by people who think they're poets, but most of them wouldn't know genuine feeling if it bit them on the ass. Maybe they never had reason to feel much. The observation hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Maybe. Marina was studying me now, really looking at me for the first time. What made you come here to the sanctuary? Honestly, I needed somewhere to go. My marriage ended, my house feels empty. And I was tired of sitting in restaurants alone. So, you thought you'd clean bird cages instead? Seemed like a better use of my time than drinking wine and feeling sorry for myself. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Besides, I continued. I've spent 30 years editing other people's words about life. Thought I might try actually living some of it. How's that working out? Ask me in a few weeks. This time, she did smile. Just a small curve of her lips, but it transformed her entire face. The guarded expression softened, and I caught a glimpse of warmth underneath all that careful reserve. I should go, she said. But she didn't move immediately. Same time tomorrow. If the weather holds, as she walked away, I realized I'd been holding my breath. The pelican watched me with knowing eyes, and I wondered if animals could sense when humans were falling into something they didn't understand. 2 weeks passed and I found myself looking forward to mornings at the sanctuary like nothing I'd experienced in years. Marina and I had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, working with the pelican, who was healing nicely. She'd started sharing small pieces of her world with me, pointing out tide patterns and explaining how different winds affected the fishing. Water's different today, she said one morning, checking the pelican's wing mobility. Storms coming in from the southeast. I glanced at the cloudless sky. Looks perfect to me. Give it 4 hours, you'll see. She was right, of course. By afternoon, dark clouds were rolling in from the Gulf, but I was more interested in the way she seemed to read the world around her like I read manuscripts, finding meaning in details others missed. How do you know so much? I asked as we prepared the bird's final treatment. The wounds had healed clean, and his wing moved freely. Now, my grandfather taught me, said, the water talks if you know how to listen. Sounds like he was a wise man. He was. Her voice carried a note of loss. Died when I was 16. Left me his boat and everything he knew about these waters. This was the most personal information she'd shared. And I felt honored by the trust. Must have been hard. Losing him so young. Made me grow up fast. She secured the pelican's cage. But he taught me to be independent. Never rely on anyone else for what you need. The philosophy felt lonely to me, but I understood it. After Claudia Hale left, I'd been forced to remember how to be alone, too. We should release him tomorrow, Marina said, running her fingers gently over the bird's head. He's ready tomorrow. The word came out sharper than I intended. Once the pelican was gone, would there be any reason for us to keep meeting? Marina looked at me curiously. Something wrong? No, it's just I've gotten attached, I guess, to the bird, among other things. The admission hung between us, and Marina's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. She busied herself with cleaning supplies, avoiding my eyes. Maybe you could show me where you release him, I said quickly. I mean, if that's something you do, I'd like to see him fly again. It's not exactly touristy. Marsh access road. Pretty isolated. I don't mind isolated. She hesitated and I watched her internal debate play out across her features. Finally, she nodded. Sunrise. Birds are more active then. The next morning, I met her at the sanctuary before dawn. She loaded the pelican into a specially designed carrier, and I followed her battered pickup truck down increasingly narrow roads until we reached a wooden dock extending into dark water. Marsh grass swayed in the pre-dawn breeze and the air smelled like salt and possibility. This is beautiful, I breathed, stepping out of my car. It's quiet, Marina agreed, carrying the pelican toward the water's edge. Good place to think. We walked to the end of the dock in comfortable silence. The eastern horizon was just beginning to lighten, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Marina sat down the carrier and opened it carefully. Come on, big guy, she murmured to the pelican. Time to go home. The bird emerged slowly, testing his wings with small flaps. Then, as if remembering what freedom felt like, he spread them wide and took off with powerful strokes, skimming the water's surface before rising toward the brightening sky. We watched until he disappeared into the distance. Two small figures standing witness to something beautiful and natural and right. Thank you, I said softly, for letting me be part of this. You did good work. He might not have made it without the extra care. I meant thank you for letting me get to know you. Marina turned to face me then, and in the soft morning light, I could see past all her careful defenses to something vulnerable underneath. Evelyn, I know this is complicated, I said, stepping closer. I know I'm probably not what you expected when you signed up to save birds. You're definitely not what I expected. The space between us felt charged, like the air before Marina's predicted storm. I could hear my heart hammering and wondered if she could, too. I haven't felt this way about anyone in maybe ever, I admitted. And I'm terrified I'm reading this all wrong. You're not reading it wrong. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But the words hit me like a wave. Before I could overthink it, before fear could stop me, I reached up and touched her face, tracing the line of her cheek with my thumb. She leaned into the contact, her eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. When she opened her eyes again, they were full of want and uncertainty, and something like hope. I've never. She began. Neither have I said. Not like this. The sun edged over the horizon as she kissed me, soft, tentative, then deeper when I answered. Her hands rose to frame my face, and I tasted salt and morning in a promise that everything was changing. When we pulled apart, breathless, the pelican was only a speck against the brightening sky. Now what? I whispered against her mouth. Now we figure it out, she said. Together. That kiss shifted the ground beneath us, and we both felt it. Over the next few days, we found reasons to meet beyond the sanctuary. Marina texted about tide charts and weather. I replied with questions about her boat and fishing techniques. We didn't mention the dock, but it lived between us like static. At last I couldn't stand the polite distance. Would you come to my place for dinner? I asked one evening as we cleaned the empty pelican enclosure. She glanced up, searching my face. Your place? Nothing fancy. Just dinner. I promise it won't smell like fish. Okay. The word was quiet, almost unsure. What time? 7? She nodded, and I felt like I'd won a lottery. Back downtown, my apartment suddenly looked too formal. Too much like the life I'd shared with Claudia Hale. I spent the afternoon tucking away photographs and nudging furniture, trying to make the rooms feel like mine instead of a magazine spread. Marina arrived exactly at 7, dark jeans, white button-down that turned her eyes impossibly blue, carrying a small bouquet of roadside wildflowers. "They're beautiful," I said, taking them. "Where did you find these?" "Growing near the marina. Thought you'd like them." The simplicity nearly undid me. Claudia Hale had favored florist roses so expensive they could pay someone's week of rent. These wildflowers felt more precious than anything I'd been given. "Come in, please." She stepped in, looking around. "It's nice. Very sophisticated." "Too sophisticated," I said. "Just different from what I'm used to." I poured wine while she scanned the books on my shelves. "You've got good taste," she said, sliding out a slim volume of poems. "Occupational hazard. I've been editing literary magazines for 20 years. Must be interesting work." "It used to be. Lately, it feels like I'm only going through the motions." She turned to me then, wineglass in hand. "What would you rather be doing?" "Honestly, I don't know. I threw myself into work after my daughter moved to California. Then, Claudia Hale and I grew apart and work became everything. Now, I'm not sure who I am without it." "You're someone who spends her mornings saving birds." "That's new." "Maybe new is good." We cooked together and I discovered she had strong opinions about seasoning and knife techniques. Her hands moved with the same confidence in my kitchen that they showed with the wildlife, and I found myself watching her more than helping. "You're staring," she said without looking up from the shrimp she was deaning. "Sorry, I like watching you work." "Why?" "You're completely present. I don't think I've seen you check your phone once since I've known you. Don't have much use for constant connection. The water teaches you to pay attention to what's right in front of you." I could learn from that. Over dinner, she told me about growing up on the Gulf, about storms that could sink a boat in minutes and mornings when the water was so still it looked like glass. I shared stories about the magazine world, the writers and their egos, the way words could be wielded like weapons or bombs. "You ever think about writing yourself?" she asked. "I used to before deadlines and budgets took over." "What would you write about?" "I don't know. Maybe this. Meeting you. Learning that life doesn't have to be so complicated." Something shifted in her expression and she reached across the table to touch my hand. "Evelyn, I know this is fast," I said quickly. "I know you probably think I'm some desperate divorce having a midlife crisis. Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think. All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you. About this morning at the dock." She squeezed my hand. "I can't stop thinking about it either." "So, what do we do?" "We could stop thinking so much." She stood, still holding my hand, and pulled me up with her. In the soft light of my dining room, she looked younger, more vulnerable. When she kissed me this time, there was no hesitation, no careful testing of boundaries. My hands found the buttons of her shirt while her lips traced the line of my neck. Everything felt urgent and inevitable and right. We moved toward the bedroom without breaking contact, shedding clothes and inhibitions in equal measure. Her skin was warm and smooth, marked by small scars that told stories of a life lived outdoors. I traced them with my fingers, my lips, learning the geography of her body. She gasped when I found sensitive spots, her hands tangling in my hair. When she moved over me, her eyes met mine in the lamplight. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." We made love with the desperate hunger of people who'd been starving without knowing it. Her touch was gentle but certain, and I discovered parts of myself I'd never known existed. Afterward, we lay entwined, our breathing slowly returning to normal. "I should probably go," she said eventually. "Stay." The word came out before I could stop it. "Please." She looked at me for a long moment, then settled more comfortably against my shoulder. "Okay." In the darkness, listening to her breathe, I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. Waking up next to Marina felt like discovering I'd been holding my breath my entire life. She slept curled against my side, her blonde hair catching the morning light streaming through my bedroom windows. I lay still, afraid to move and break whatever spell had brought us to this moment. "You're thinking too loud," she murmured against my shoulder. "Sorry, occupational hazard." She lifted her head to look at me, those blue eyes still heavy with sleep. "Any regrets?" "Only that we waited so long to do this." She smiled. The real one I'd come to treasure, and kissed me softly. I should head out. Boat needs attention before the weather turns. Storm coming. Always is down here. After she left, I floated through my morning routine in a haze of contentment. Everything felt different, brighter somehow. Even my coffee tasted better. 2 days later, Marina suggested we grab lunch in the historic district. There's a place that makes decent pobo, she said. Figured you might want to see more of the city than just the sanctuary. Mobile's downtown had a faded elegance that reminded me of an aging southern belle. All wrought iron balconies and moss-draped oaks. We found a small cafe tucked between antique shops and ordered shrimp pie that dripped with sauce and possibility. I used to come here with my grandfather, Marina said, looking around the narrow streets. He'd bring me after doctor appointments or when we needed boat supplies. Must have good memories here. Some? Her expression darkened slightly, some not so good. We were walking back toward our cars when the shouting started. Across the street, 2 groups of men faced off in front of a pawn shop. Their voices carried an edge that made my skin prickle with recognition of danger. We should go, Marina said quietly, her hand finding my arm. Before we could move, one of the men pulled something from his jacket. The afternoon sun caught the metal and I realized with sick clarity that it was a knife. Tommy, you piece of, one man yelled. You think you can move product on our territory? Territory? The man with the knife laughed, but there was nothing humorous in the sound. Your territory is whatever we say it is. More men appeared from doorways and parked cars, forming loose circles around the confrontation. This wasn't random street violence. This was organized, territorial, criminal. Damn, Marina whispered beside me. We need to leave now. But it was too late. One of the men spotted us across the street. 2 women obviously out of place in this testosterone-fueled standoff. He nudged his companion and pointed in our direction. The man with the knife turned to look at us, and I saw Marina freeze beside me. Oh, hell. She breathed. You know him? Rico Alvarez. He used to run with my brother before. She swallowed hard before Caleb died. The recognition was mutual. Rico's eyes narrowed and he said something to the men near him. Several heads turned our way and the predatory interest in their gazes made my blood run cold. Ladies, Rico called out, his voice carrying clearly across the empty street. Marina sure didn't expect to see you around these parts. We were just leaving, Marina called back, already pulling me toward my car. Not so fast. Been wanting to have a conversation with you about your brother's business. The knife in his hand wasn't idle anymore. He was holding it like he knew how to use it. I don't know anything about Caleb's business, Marina said. But her voice carried a tremor that suggested otherwise. See, I don't believe that. Caleb was family, right? Family shares things. The other group of men had backed away from the immediate confrontation, recognizing that whatever was happening now was bigger than their territorial dispute. We'd become the center of attention, and none of it felt friendly. Get in the car, Marina said under her breath. Keys ready. But as we moved toward my sedan, more men emerged from the shadows between buildings. They weren't trying to hide their interest anymore. Whatever Rico wanted from Marina, he wasn't planning to ask politely. The first gunshot cracked like thunder, and everything went to hell. I hit the ground instinctively, pulling Marina down with me behind a parked truck. More shots followed and I could hear men shouting, cursing, the sound of breaking glass and running feet. Stay down, Marina hissed. Her body covering mine protectively. Through the truck's windows, I could see muzzle flashes and figures darting between buildings. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the afternoon heat, and my ears rang from the noise. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The shooting stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of car engines and squealing tires as the gang scattered in different directions. We have to go, Marina said, pulling me to my feet. Before the cops get here and start asking questions we can't answer. My hands shook as I fumbled for my keys. What the hell just happened? Nothing good. She looked around frantically as we reached my car. Drive fast. I'll explain when we're somewhere safe. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror of Rico Alvarez watching from beside a black SUV. Even at that distance, I could feel the malevolence in his stare. Marina, I said as we turned onto a main thoroughfare, my voice steadier than I felt. I think we're in serious trouble. Yeah, she said grimly, still scanning the mirrors. We really are. I drove aimlessly through mobile suburbs while Marina sat silent beside me, her hands clenched in her lap. The adrenaline from the shooting was wearing off, leaving behind a cold dread that settled in my stomach like lead. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "I don't know. Somewhere they won't find us." I glanced at her. "You need to tell me what just happened back there." She stared out the window at the passing strip malls and gas stations. "My brother Caleb got involved with some bad people before he died. Drug runners, mostly small-time stuff that turned big-time fast." "What kind of involvement?" "He was moving product for them. Cocaine, heroin, whatever they needed. Transported from the Gulf to inland buyers. Used his fishing boat as cover." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Enrico thinks you know something about it." "Caleb died 3 years ago. Boat accident during a storm." Or that's what everyone assumed. But Rico and his crew always thought he was holding out on them, hiding money or drugs somewhere. "Were you involved?" "Hell no. I barely spoke to Caleb the last 2 years of his life." "But that doesn't matter to them. They think blood means complicity." I pulled into a motel parking lot, one of those anonymous places that took cash and didn't ask questions. "We need to think this through. They saw us together, which means they know about me now, too." "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely audible. "I never meant for you to get pulled into this." "Don't apologize. Just help me understand what we're dealing with." Inside the motel room with the curtains drawn and the door double locked, Marina finally started talking. She told me about growing up in a family where her father drank too much and her mother worked double shifts to keep food on the table. Caleb had been her protector until he got seduced by easy money and dangerous friends. "He changed after he started working for them," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "got paranoid, aggressive, started carrying a gun and looking over his shoulder all the time." "How did he die?" Official story was that he took the boat out alone during a storm warning. Coast Guard found pieces of the hull 2 days later. Nobody. "But you don't believe that?" "Caleb knew those waters better than anyone. He wouldn't have gone out in weather like that unless someone made him." I sat beside her on the bed, close enough to offer comfort, but careful not to crowd her. "What do you think really happened?" "I think he tried to get out. Maybe he was skimming money. Or maybe he just got tired of being afraid all the time. Either way, they killed him for it. And now they think you have whatever he was hiding." "Yeah." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our situation settling around us like fog. Outside, traffic hummed past on the highway. Normal people living normal lives while we hid in a $12 a night motel room. "I have connections," I said finally. "People in the media, some contacts, and law enforcement." "Maybe we can get protection from who?" "Half the cops in Mobile are probably on someone's payroll." "Then we go higher." "State police, FBI." "With what evidence?" "We witnessed a gang fight, nothing more. Enrico's smart enough to make sure any official investigation leads nowhere." She was right, and we both knew it. We were trapped between criminals who wanted something we didn't have and a system too corrupted to offer real protection. "There's something else," Marina said quietly. "Before Caleb died, he came to see me, said he'd left something for me, somewhere safe." I thought he meant money or maybe some kind of insurance policy. "You never looked for it?" I was too scared and too angry. I figured whatever he'd gotten himself into, I wanted no part of it. But now I'm wondering if whatever he left might be the key to getting these people off our backs. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. "So, we find it. Will you think I'm abandoning you now after everything?" She looked at me with something like wonder. "You could walk away. Go back to your life. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I fell in love with you." The words hung between us and I realized I'd said them without meaning to, but they were true and I didn't want to take them back. "Love," she whispered. "Yes. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but there it is." She kissed me then, soft and desperate, and I tasted salt on her lips. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "I love you, too," she said. "Which is why I can't let you do this. You don't get to decide that. Evelyn, these people kill for a living. They won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. Then, we make sure they don't get the chance." We ordered pizza and spent the evening planning. Marina drew maps of places Caleb might have hidden something, marked locations where he'd kept boats or equipment. We talked about timing, about how to search without being seen, about what we'd do if we found something incriminating. As night fell, we lay together on the motel's lumpy mattress holding each other close. The situation was desperate, but being with her felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Promise me something," she said in the darkness. "Anything. If this goes bad, if they get too close, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to be a hero. Just run. Promise me the same thing, Marina. Promise." I kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I promise." We both knew it was a lie, but sometimes lies are the only comfort we have. We left the motel at dawn, driving separate cars to Caleb's old place near the docks. The house was a weathered shotgun shack that looked abandoned, paint peeling and windows boarded up. But Marina still had a key. "He never changed the locks," she explained as we slipped inside. "Figured if anyone wanted to rob him, they were welcome to try." The interior smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. Someone had clearly searched the place before us. Drawers pulled out and furniture overturned. But they'd been looking for obvious hiding spots, not the subtle ones Caleb might have used. "Help me move this," Marina said, indicating a heavy bookshelf against the back wall. Behind it, we found a loose floorboard. Underneath was a waterproof bag containing documents, photographs, and a small digital recorder. My hands trembled as I pulled out the papers. "These are shipping manifests," I said, scanning the pages, "boat registrations, cargo logs, and look at these names." Marina leaned over my shoulder. "Police badges, judge signatures, city council members. Your brother was documenting everyone involved in the operation." The photographs were even more damning. Caleb had been careful, using a telephoto lens to capture money exchanges, drug transfers, meetings between criminals and public officials. The corruption went deeper than either of us had imagined. "There's enough here to bring down half the power structure in Mobile," I said, "which is why they killed him." The digital recorder contained hours of conversations. Caleb's voice documenting dates, times, and criminal activities. He'd been building a case, probably planning to trade the information for his freedom. "We need to get this to someone who can't be bought," I said. "Like who?" "Federal authorities. The FBI has a field office in Birmingham. I have a contact there, someone I interviewed for a story about organized crime last year." "You think they'll believe us with this evidence?" "They'll have to." But as we prepared to leave, Marina grabbed my arm. Car engines outside, multiple vehicles. Through the boarded windows, I could see black SUVs pulling up to the house. Men in dark clothing emerged, and I recognized Rico Alvarez among them. "Back door," Marina whispered, stuffing the evidence into her jacket. We slipped out through the kitchen as the front door exploded inward. Shouts and heavy footsteps followed us as we ran toward the marsh behind the house. "This way," Marina said, leading me along a narrow path through tall grass. "There's a boat dock about half a mile through the wetlands." Behind us, I could hear Rico's voice shouting orders, dogs barking, the sound of systematic searching. They weren't giving up easily. We made it to the dock just as the first searchers appeared at the marsh edge. Marina's fishing boat was borrowed there, a simple but sturdy vessel that looked like it had weathered many storms. "Cast off," she said, starting the engine. "We're going to make a run for it." "Where?" "Open water. They can't follow us in those big boats, and I know places to hide." The engine roared to life, and we pulled away from the dock just as gunshots cracked behind us. Bullets winded over our heads, and I ducked instinctively. "Stay down," Marina shouted over the engine noise. "They're trying to disable the boat." We raced across the open water, spray flying around us as Marina pushed the boat to its limits. Behind us, smaller boats had joined the chase. But she was right about knowing the waters. She navigated through shallow channels and around hidden sandbars with the skill of someone who'd grown up on these waters. "There," she pointed to a cluster of mangrove islands ahead. "We can lose them in the maze." The islands were a labyrinth of narrow waterways overhung with twisted trees. Marina cut the engine and let us drift silently through the green shadows while our pursuers roared past the main channel. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "This only buys us time." Time to do what?" "Get this evidence to your FBI contact, but not from here. We need to get out of Alabama entirely." "Where?" "I know people in Louisiana, fishermen who don't ask questions. They can get us to New Orleans, and from there we can contact federal authorities." We waited until nightfall before making our move. Marina navigated by stars and instinct, keeping the boat in deeper water as we headed west along the coast. The evidence was wrapped in plastic and hidden in a compartment she'd built into the boat's hull. "How long until we reach Louisiana?" I asked. 6 hours if the weather holds. Maybe 8 if we hit rough seas. And if they find us, then we go down fighting. The night was clear, stars reflecting off the calm water like scattered diamonds. Despite the danger, being alone with Marina on the open ocean felt peaceful. We were together. We had evidence that could end this nightmare. And for the first time in days, I felt hope. What will you do after this is over? I asked as we shared a thermos of coffee. Depends on whether we survive it. We will. And then what? She considered the question. Maybe leave the Gulf for a while. Go somewhere they can't find us together. If you want. I want. She smiled. The first genuine expression of happiness I'd seen from her in days. Then we'll figure it out. Find a place where we can start over. I'd like that. As dawn approached, we could see the Louisiana coastline ahead. Soon we'd be in federal custody, turning over evidence that would destroy the organization that killed Caleb and threatened us. Almost there, Marina said, her voice carrying relief. But as we approached the harbor, she suddenly cut the engine. Something's wrong. What? Those boats in the harbor? They're not local fishing vessels. Through binoculars, I could see men in dark clothing waiting on the docks. Rico and his crew had somehow anticipated our destination. They're everywhere. I breathed. Not everywhere, Marina said grimly. But we're running out of places to run. We turned back toward open water, keeping low as bullets whistled over our heads from the shore. Marina pushed the boat hard, but fuel was running low and our options were disappearing fast. There, she pointed to a small barrier island, barely visible in the morning mist. We can beach the boat and call for help from there. But as we approached the island, more boats appeared on the horizon. The noose was tightening, and with a cold jolt I realized Rico's network ran deeper than we'd ever guessed. They've got boats closing from 3 directions, I said, sweeping the water with the binoculars. Then we hold here, Marina answered, running the skiff aground on a sliver of sand barely 50 yards wide. Palm trees and scrub offered only scant cover, but it beat getting boxed in on open water. I need to tell you something, she said as we gathered the evidence and our few supplies. My FBI contact, Agent Elena Torres. I called her from the motel yesterday. What did she say? She's been chasing this same crew for months. She's coming, but it'll take time. How long? 6 hours. Maybe more. Engines swelled in the distance. Through the glass I counted at least 4 boats angling toward us. We had enough proof to gut their operation, if we stayed alive long enough to hand it over. Whatever happens, I said, cupping Marina's face, meeting you changed everything. You made me feel alive again. Don't talk like this is goodbye, she shot back. We're getting out. I know. But just in case, I kissed her, salt and fear and love braided together. When we parted, her eyes shone. I love you too, she whispered. More than I thought possible. The first boat hit sand and Rico Alvarez strode onto the beach with half a dozen armed men. They fanned out with practiced precision, hemming us in among the palms. Marina's shore, Rico called. Let's finish this. Hand over what Caleb left, and maybe your girlfriend walks. Like hell. I yelled. The journalist speaks, he laughed, mirthless. This would have been easier if you'd minded your business. Corruption is my business. Corruption? He sneered. We're the system down here. Cops, judges, politicians, they work for us. You really think a few old photos change that? Maybe not, I said. But it's a start. Marina squeezed my hand. Torres will be here. We just have to stay breathing. Sentimental, Rico taunted. Shame Caleb didn't have someone guarding his back when he tried to double-cross family. You killed him, Marina called, voice cutting across the sand. He killed himself getting greedy. Same as you're about to. The standoff dragged, a taut wire ready to snap. Rico's men had us wrapped, but a head-on push could destroy the evidence they wanted. If we moved, we'd be cut down. Then I heard it, the thrum of helicopters from the north. Sounds like your cavalry's early, Rico said evenly. Doesn't matter. By the time they touch down, this is over. FBI, a voice thundered from loudspeakers overhead. This is Agent Torres. Lower your weapons and step away from the civilians. Go to hell. Rico shouted back. What followed was chaos. Federal agents descended on ropes while Rico's men opened fire. The air filled with a crack of gunshots and the whine of ricochets off palm trees. Marina and I pressed ourselves flat against the sand, clutching each other as the battle raged around us. When it was over, 3 of Rico's men were down and the rest were in handcuffs. Agent Torres approached us as we stood on shaky legs. She was a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. "You two okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," I said, pulling out the waterproof bag. "We have everything you need to take down the entire network." Torres examined the evidence with growing excitement. "This is incredible. Financial records, photographs, recorded conversations. We can roll up the whole organization with this." "What happens to us?" Marina asked. "Witness protection if you want it. New identities, relocation, the whole package. It'll take months to process all these cases and some very dangerous people are going to be very angry." Marina and I looked at each other and I could see the same thought in her eyes. Starting over somewhere new together with nothing but each other and the promise of a future. "Yes," we said in unison. 6 months later, we were in a small coastal town in Oregon running a wildlife rehabilitation center under our new names. The trials were just beginning, but Rico and dozens of others were behind bars, and the corruption network was crumbling. Every morning, we'd release recovered seabirds back to the wild, watching them soar toward the horizon with the kind of freedom we'd found in each other. The pelican that brought us together became the symbol of our new life. A reminder that sometimes broken things could heal and fly again. "Any regrets?" Marina asked one evening as we watched the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of golden rose. "Only that it took me 59 years to find you." She kissed me softly, her lips warm against mine. "Worth the wait. Definitely worth the wait." The Oregon coast was nothing like the Gulf waters where we'd first met. Here, the waves crashed against rocky cliffs instead of lapping at sandy shores, and the air carried the bite of winter, even in summer. But watching Marina work with the injured harbor seals at our new wildlife center, I knew we'd found home. "How's she doing?" I asked, approaching the pool where our latest patient floated. The seal pup had been found with fishing net wrapped around her flippers, much like our first pelican back in Mobile. "Better. Another week and she'll be ready for release." 2 years had passed since the trials ended. Rico Alvarez got life without parole along with 12 other members of his organization. The corruption network that had strangled Mobile for decades was finally broken. Though I suspected new players would eventually fill the void. "Mrs. Parker called," I said, referring to our current identity. "The FBI had done a thorough job creating our new lives. She wants to interview us for the local paper about the center." "Think that's safe?" "Agent Torres says the last of Rico's associates was sentenced 3 months ago. We're not in hiding anymore." Marina nodded. But I could see the caution that had become second nature to both of us. Some habits died hard. We'd built something beautiful here, a small rehabilitation center that specialized in marine mammals and seabirds. The work was demanding but rewarding, and we'd found a community that accepted us without question. 2 women running a wildlife sanctuary wasn't unusual in this part of Oregon. "I have something for you," Marina said that evening as we sat on our porch overlooking the ocean. She pulled out a small velvet box, her hands trembling slightly. "Marina, I know we can't legally marry under our real names, and I know our whole life is built on lies the FBI created, but what we have isn't fake. What I feel for you isn't part of some witness protection program." She opened the box to reveal a simple silver band with a small diamond that caught the lamplight. "I want to spend whatever time we have left being completely honest about one thing. I love you, Evelyn Hart, Nora Parker, whatever name you're using. Will you marry me?" I was crying before she finished speaking. The kind of tears that come from happiness too big to contain. "Yes. Yes, of course. Yes." We had a small ceremony on the beach where we'd first watched seals return to the wild. Agent Torres officiated using her authority as a federal agent to make it legal under our new identities. It wasn't traditional, but nothing about our relationship had been traditional. "I never thought I'd find this," I said during our vows, looking into Marina's blue eyes. "I spent 60 years thinking I knew what love was, but I was wrong. Love is this feeling that home isn't a place, it's a person." "You saved me," she replied. "Not from the criminals or the danger, but from a life where I'd given up on believing in anything good. You made me remember what it felt like to hope." The kiss we shared as wives felt different from all the others. Deeper somehow, weighted with promise and permanence. That night, as we made love with the sound of waves crashing below our bedroom window, I traced the small scars on Marina's hands and arms. The marks that told the story of her life on the Gulf. She had new scars now, too, from our months of running and hiding. But they were part of our story together. Do you miss it? I asked afterward. Our bodies still entwined. The fishing, the Gulf, your old life. Sometimes, she admitted, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. What we have is worth more than all the fish in the ocean. Even when I'm being impossible about organization systems, especially then. We laughed, the sound carrying through the open window into the night. The next morning brought news that would change everything again. Agent Torres called with information about a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell our story about the corrupt network we'd helped expose and the wildlife sanctuary we'd built from the ashes of our old lives. It could help other women in similar situations, Torres explained. Show them that it's possible to start over, to build something beautiful from something terrible. Using our real names, I asked if you're comfortable with that. The last of Rico's organization is behind bars, and your story deserves to be told. Marina and I looked at each other across the breakfast table, the same understanding passing between us that had connected us that first morning with the injured pelican. Yes, we said together. 6 months later, we stood on the same beach where we'd married, watching the film crew pack up their equipment. The documentary would air next month, tracing how Evelyn Hart and Marina Shore found love and purpose in the unlikeliest of ways. Any regrets? Marina asked, repeating the same question from that first night in Oregon. Only that we can't go back and tell our younger selves it all turns out, I said. They probably wouldn't have believed us. Probably not. Down the beach, a cluster of seals we'd rehabilitated skimmed the surf, sleek bodies slicing through waves with unfiltered joy. They'd arrived to us broken. Now they were mended, trusting again, returned to the wild. Think we'll inspire other women? I asked. I think we'll remind anyone who's ever felt lost that it's never too late to begin again, she said. As the sun slipped over the Pacific, rinsing the sky in colors that felt like hope and possibility, I understood our story wasn't closing out here. It was opening, just beginning, with all the promise tomorrow could carry.